This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. Welcome into episode number 77, double sevens here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. I'm Noah Grant, joined alongside my co-host Nick Maxon. Nick, the viewers can't see it because I have my shirt zipped up because I've got a green screen, but you and I woke up actually wearing the same exact shirt this morning. So there's a great start. For the audio listeners, what shirt are we wearing this morning?
We're wearing Dollar Bill Kirill.
Great shirt. Soda Stick Co., right? If I'm not mistaken.
Soda Stick Co. And the dollar signs over the sunglasses on the kid's face is, definitely is what he's seen and what he's been seeing all summer. Question is, can we actually get that in writing and in a contract for, a few years here with the Minnesota Wild so that we can actually play again, because that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, I was going to say, does the dollar sign actually just say 9.5 mil on yours? Did you put a piece of tape on it? Anyway. We're gonna talk about that in our main show, as well as the unveiling of the Minnesota Wild Winter Classic uniforms. Our thoughts on that. We did a poll on that as well, and we're going to discuss what our fans thought and then give our take as well. Then the extra ice session. We had an offer sheet that we discussed last week. We are now 7 days past that offer sheet, and it was not accepted. It was accepted. It was not matched, I should say. And we're going to talk about that in our extra ice session, as well as a quick little tidbit here in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. That's what we've got coming in store for you in this show. And without further ado, Mr. Maxon, let's get started. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
So we're going to start outside the United States and Canada and Mexico. We're just going to start international news. We're just going to go across a couple of oceans here.
That was a beautiful, if this was my morning news, you really sold me on the fact that this is now international news.
I try to make it clear for the fans, Noah. But it is kind of fun stuff here. For the women's, of course, Canada did claw their way back from a 2-goal deficit to eventually win gold in overtime. Marie-Philippe Poulin, who probably is, if not one of the best, if not the best women's hockey players in the entire world, capping off the 3-2 victory for the Canadians over the United States. Couple of St. Cloud State women's hockey players that were participating in the tournament, however, not part of that gold medal game. Janina Newland had a goal and was even for her plus minus for Team Finland in the tournament. For Czech Republic, Klára Hmlerova tallied an assist with was +3. Czech Republic, how about that? How about Japan taking them out? I believe that was the quarterfinal or the semifinal round. Pretty interesting stuff there, but just a fantastic team to watch for Czech Republic. High flying, high offense. Too bad they couldn't go a little bit farther in the tournament. And then a former Husky stand Laura Kluge for Team Germany also was a +1. Did not register a point, but was definitely visible on the ice for that team. But let's go back to the men's side here, Noah. Finally, some news that both the NHL as well as the the double IHF. I always want to say double IHF for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. But either way,
do you remember how to spell your name when you wake up in the morning, or do you?
I don't even know my name half the time, honestly. So, but the Olympics and the NHL have come to an agreement, which is good news for both the players and the fans, I believe, especially for the Olympics side. So the NHL players will now be officially taking part in the 2022 Winter Olympics. That's going to be held in Beijing, China. Quite a bit of deliberation. Now, a couple of the holdups, Noah, was the insurance part of it. So who would pay in case there was any sicknesses, that kind of thing. Also, there's plenty of little out clauses. Again, the NHL can pull out if games are canceled or if conditions worsen in Beijing. So there's plenty of flexibility in this agreement, which I think is a good thing for both sides, just in case things do end up changing. But there is an opt-out deadline for when the NHL can pull out completely. That's at the end of January. Coming up here in about 4 months. Can you believe it's January in 4 months? That's crazy. But other than that, NHL going and their players going over to Beijing for the Winter Olympics, and there definitely will be some Minnesota Wild players. We'll probably have to talk about that next week. No, we should be talking some of our candidates on the Minnesota Wild who probably will be suiting up for their respective countries in that battle. So, but good news for both sides.
Yeah, exciting to see, hopefully, the Olympics coming back to town in the NHL world, if you will. Speaking of timelines, by the way, we're here Sunday, September 5th. We're less than a month away from some Huskies hockey getting started as well, too. Pretty exciting for that, obviously, and we're stoked to get another round and another season, and hopefully, like we talked about, a more normal season under our belt as well. Moving over to some organizational news, we have some big news out of Arizona, the NHL, and of course the OHL, and their various things going on. We're going to start a little more locally, or a little more regional, if you will. The Arizona Coyotes, they've officially filed a bid for a new arena in Tempe, Arizona, kind of something that we had talked about in a previous show. The site is a 46-acre plot near Tempe Town Lake. I don't know where that is, but I'm going to pretend you Arizona people know.
It's about literally 5 minutes southeast of the airport. It's across the river, and it's kind of in I would say, entertainment district or like a park district. And the actual plot of land that you're discussing is actually a former city compost site. So it's actually kind of a part of a redevelopment plan in the area, just to kind of bring a little bit more entertainment to the area and just kind of make use out of a plot of land that's kind of, I wouldn't call it an eyesore. I actually took a little bit of a look through some websites at the actual plot of land, and it's not ugly by any means, but you can certainly see it looks like it's underutilized, and it's also right on the river there. Could be a quite scenic area there too for the Coyotes if they end up winning the bid one, and actually trying to drive. I also know that they want some some residential living there, but also I think some restaurants and stuff like that too. So trying to make just more use of the land more than anything.
So a compost site. So the Coyotes right now are hot garbage on and off the ice. What you're
And they'll be playing on a site that's cold garbage. So
yeah,
for a while.
Composting is a good thing, though. If you get a chance to have a garden and you compost, you should compost. It's an important thing. The city, like you had mentioned, they also took other bids as well and required those submissions by 3 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. A committee of those city staffers will now review those proposals and make a recommendation to the city council how to best utilize that plot of land, which they can then approve or reject that proposal. The Coyotes and the city of Tempe have reportedly been negotiating for about 2 years or so, even though the Coyotes, they've been in Glendale since 2003. So this has kind of been a relationship that started to sour as time has gone on. And Tempe, of course, is kitty corner to Arizona State University as well, which does have their Division I men's hockey program. Moving over to bigger National Hockey League news, they have now noted that teams can suspend vaccinated players with exemptions. The suspensions are included if an unvaccinated player isn't allowed to travel due to regulations in a jurisdiction. A player would be docked 1 day's salary for each day he's unable to be with his team. So, for example, traveling to Canada, you might not even be able to get into Canada.
Can't get into Canada at all.
Exactly. So therefore, you have to stay home. You get docked pay, and not to mention, there's not many players in the NHL who could stay home and keep their spot in the lineup on top of that. So the NHL has kind of made its stance known here. Medical reasons and sincerely held religious beliefs are reportedly among the exceptions to this policy. Medical reasons, obviously, very understandable. The second one, the religious beliefs, is kind of more of a subjective thing, obviously, and I don't have any other information. I'm guessing that's a case-by-case thing. I'm sure they have more in the policy, but that's kind of the overarching view from what I had seen, or from what I had saw. Wow, that was about as North Dakotan as it gets right there. Testing will continue this season for players, and fully vaccinated players will undergo PCR exams at least every 3 days. That's a lot of testing. While unvaccinated players will be tested every day if you're unvaccinated. The NHL will treat any fully vaccinated players' positive COVID-19 test as a hockey-related injury, kind of similar to what they did last year in the current CPA. So those unvaccinated players, should they decide not to get the vaccine or can't get the vaccine for whatever reason. They're going to essentially live in a bubble. They won't be allowed into internal venues on the road, aside from the arena, practice rink, and team hotel. So they can't use the shared facilities at the hotel, even with their teammates, or host visitors in their hotel rooms at all. Other than, fully vaccinated family members and unvaccinated players, they also aren't allowed to eat or drink at establishments that are open to the public. So when they're traveling on the road, they can't go out and grab a drink or something like that after a game. I'll get your opinion here in just a second here, Nick. Fully vaccinated and masked media members will be able to interview players in the dressing rooms, according to Michael Russo. And it's estimated that as roughly about 95% of the NHL players right now are actually vaccinated in the NHL, which is up from about 10% from about a month ago. As far as coaches are concerned, the rules are a little bit less clear. We saw this past week as well, San Jose Sharks associate coach Rocky Thompson. He was actually the latest to leave his club after a medical exemption that prevents him from taking the COVID-19 vaccine. Under the new league protocols, he is not permitted to fulfill his duties for the Sharks coaching staff at this time. So players, it's a little more obvious, but the coaching staffs have a little bit more kinks to be worked out. What do you want to add here, Mr. Maxson?
So a couple of things also is that these players who are suspended for not being vaccinated, unless they fall under those exemptions as you lined out, they will not be paid. And from what I believe Michael Russo also reporting too, that they would also, for the time that they were suspended, lose their share of the HRR, or hockey-related revenue. So they not only lose their paycheck, but they lose that sort of that bonus money that, now mind you, HRR, that's part of its ticket sales, that's merchandise sales, that's anything that the league makes money. They would lose that share, that 50-50 split for the time that they're suspended. So they're really trying to make a stand here that, we're going to hit you in your pocketbook. It's not just going to be you're suspended and you're still getting paid. No, you're losing everything. And that's including, your share of the league's revenue, which is, I think, huge. Again, we've talked about it ad nauseum, these last, probably 12 to 14 months about how the pandemic has really affected the financials for, just about everybody, but the National Hockey League, they lost over $3.8 billion last season.
Yeah.
And that's,
it's just a business decision that has to happen.
It is. And especially now that there is effectively a remedy, and granted, it's not a permanent solution. At least I don't think it's a permanent solution just yet, but it definitely is buying us time to maybe come up with something a little bit different or the better treatment options. Yeah. But now that there's something that is now FDA approved, at least for the most part, at least in one vaccine, that the others are supposedly going to be following suit. Moderna supposedly coming next couple of weeks as well. This is where these things are headed. And we saw that also locally at the University of Minnesota. If you want to live on campus, you must be fully vaccinated. St. Cloud State, part of the Minnesota state system, has not, at least as far as I understand, has not made an announcement that they will require anybody being vaccinated. As of yet, they're just doing a mask policy. But as you mentioned, it's a business decision, and especially for the league that's trying to claw their way back up to even ground here in terms of the dollar money. This is a necessary thing that has to be done.
Yeah, I think the thing that people have to remember, if something big happens with the league where there's a big COVID outbreak, the best interest and best move for the league is to actually shut down the league. So obviously they don't want to do that. They want to create revenue and try to claw their way back at that financial deficit like you had mentioned. Speaking of biding your time, the Ontario Hockey League, they've suspended controversial Montreal Canadiens draft pick Logan Mailloux indefinitely after he violated, quote, the expectation of the appropriate conduct of an OHL player, end quote. The OHL does cite that November 2020 incident that we've discussed as the reason for the suspension. The London Knights player obviously has the opportunity to apply for reinstatement on or after January 1st of 2022. Whether or not Mailloux is reinstated will depend on his conduct since his return to Canada, as well as any treatment and education he receives. Of course, Montreal did select Mailloux with a 31st pick in the first round in this last year's draft after he said 3 days prior that he essentially did not want any team to draft him. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one. Just from like a pure player development standpoint, this is an interesting one. So I have to keep our eyes on this one.
I think this goes back to, we spent an extra ice session on this, Noah, and I'm just going to comment quickly is, we didn't have a lot of information surrounding, him specifically. And I know that we talked about, during that time, how do we just, it's not just trying to, just move past it and try to look forward, but, how does, both sides recover from this? And we were under sort of the impression at least from the initial media reports, that there was an apology. It definitely felt like maybe there was remorse there. From what we've learned since that episode, Noah, is that that's maybe not the case. That Logan never has made an official apology. It sounds like there was maybe some bragging behind the scenes after this picture was taken. So, it's definitely changed my, outlook on it, especially when the whole debate of whether Montreal should have drafted him first, in the first round, or maybe should he have been drafted at all, right? I think we had that debate beforehand, but I like this move, honestly. And from what it sounds like is even the Ontario Hockey League. And, it's honest, it's kind of weird in a sense where I think the OHL is coming to the same realization as we are, where, you hear the initially, and, had they been confident, that he indeed, was remorseful, or wasn't remorseful, then maybe would have suspended him right away. The fact they took this long tells me that maybe they've been following what he's been doing, or maybe more importantly, what he's not been doing. And they made a decision now, almost a month after the initial story came to light here in the public. So I agree with the move. If the OHL is going to take a stance and almost force the hand, and mind you, in the statement, as you said it before, depending on his reinstatement will depend on his conduct when he returns to Canada and any treatment or education. So they're really putting it down in writing of what they want to see from him, and I completely agree with this move.
Yeah, and it's the ball is in Mayu's court, and I think it's still, even though that I think our perspective of the situation has changed based on new information, I think the process still remains the same, where he's getting his opportunity still to be a better person and have that opportunity. It's just, he's not going to be playing hockey in the OHL, and he's going to have to move forward from there, and hopefully we all will too. So.
Exactly. And again, in 3 months' time, he could be back in the OHL again. It depends on his, development, and depends on, some of the steps that he's got to take. Like, and I guess the thing, I think all of us, we've made mistakes in the past, and, certainly there are mistakes others have made that are bigger than others per se. He's definitely made a big one. And now it's, how do you get yourself back into the right spot? How do you recover from this? So, and we do, honestly, from just a human perspective, we hope that he does, and we hope that the victim too, as we mentioned before in our last time that we talked about this, also gets the proper justice, the proper treatment, and the proper support for that victim as well. So speaking of other hockey news, let's go back to the NHL here. A couple of new deals here to sign out, and more extensions than anything. Colton Parayko with a very nice team-friendly 8-year extension, $6.5 million per season. Ottawa extending Drake Batherson to a 6-year deal. That one surprised me a little bit, Noah. Drake has been kind of an inconsistent player, and for Ottawa to extend him for 6 years, and I get the money made sense. It's a nice team-friendly deal, but 6 years to me felt risky. But the Sens getting him a nice extension, also extending from the Senators Philip Gustafson for a 2-year deal, and then Philadelphia also extending Joel Farabee to a 6-year $30 million pact. So a couple of bigger extensions there. But then Philip Roenick, Casey Middlestad, Henry Jokiharju, Eli Tolvanen, and Connor Murphy, but scattered around the NHL. So we got Detroit, Buffalo, we've got Nashville, and then Chicago.
Yep.
3 and 4 year deals for those younger kids. And then the Islanders finally signing some forwards, finally making the announcements, right? And the one thing that they haven't announced, but I believe Michael Russo also noting that former Wild forward Zach Parise does supposedly have a deal in place, although it hasn't been publicly announced with the Islanders. Supposedly that deal is for a league minimum, which I believe is $750,000. Also Seattle adding Riley Sheehan for a year, Brian Boyle and Jack Johnson earning PTOs or professional tryouts with Pittsburgh and Colorado respectively. So some movement happening right before as we hit the start of training camp. Again, Brian Boyle and Jack Johnson. I don't know. Those are tough for me. Brian Boyle to me, I think has more of a shot than Jack Johnson. I think Jack Johnson in his prime with LA, I think was a good defenseman, but since he's bumped from the league, I think he's had a very tough time, just kind of finding his game back. I think he lost it. I know he's been dealing with injuries too. So, but we'll see, you never know.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to keep our eye on that one. Of course, professional tryout offers one of those things that we're going to find a resolution to very, very quickly as we come out of camp and as we move forward here in the NHL season. Welcome into episode number 77. Once again, Noah Grant alongside my co-host and Nick Maxon. Nick, we already mentioned that we're wearing the same shirt this morning, but other than that, how are you doing this week? What are you up to? Are you finally back into the school swing of things, or are you already over it?
Back in the swing of it. As I mentioned before, this is a pretty busy fall for me, both in terms of just getting, I've got a pretty heavy class load. And that's by design because as spring comes forward and you're on the home stretch, as they say, I'm supposed to graduate this spring. Wanted to make myself as much available as I could for an internship, as well as being able to possibly meet prospective employers. So being able to travel and also just concentrate on some of the hockey stuff that's going on. So it's going to be a busy fall. Yes, I'm in the swing of it. Yes, I'm already sick of it. But, at the end of it, hockey season, as you mentioned, less than 30 days away here for the Huskies. And speaking of, sort of the season starting, one thing that I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and it hasn't been confirmed, but thought that there may be like a red versus black, like inter-squad scrimmage. Well, there's been that NCAA waiver for exhibition games where now you can play someone in your own division, and a couple of teams, even the NCHC, are kind of hosting their own exhibition games. I believe was that North Dakota is playing Duluth, maybe. There's a couple of those things happening, so I'm kind of curious as to whether St. Cloud will jump on the bandwagon and maybe play like St. John's, or do they play somebody else to kind of get their legs underneath them, some actual competition with another team before the non-conference schedule starts out here October 2nd, again against St. Thomas. So nonetheless, we're on the home stretch here to get that season started, and definitely the number 2 team entering it into the season, the preseason poll for St. Cloud. It's going to be an exciting start to the season.
Yeah, nonetheless, we're going to get started. Or as our friend Hans Bristol would always say, none of the less. I always love that. None of the less. It was amazing. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, we are excited for the season right around the corner. I'm excited. Obviously, we don't have school tomorrow, Labor Day, so it's kind of nice to have that off as well. And then Tuesday, I'm actually in the GI lab. I'm going to be starting a bunch of IVs next week. Who knows?
It must be pretty sick.
Yeah, I say, who knows? It could be a bloody mess, as they say. I feel at least there's probably at least one listener who is driving through their vehicle right now that just got like a chill up their spine or something. I mean, I get it. I mean, people don't like having IVs put in them. But I got to be honest with you, Nick, I found out over the past week and a half, it's a lot easier to put an IV in someone than get one.
Probably.
Yeah. Really checks out. Actually not that intimidating. It's one of the biggest thing is, feeling comfortable with like the process of like, people who are good at IVs. It's not so much even about the stick. It's about just the whole process and feeling like you're quick and efficient for people. That's the biggest thing that, takes a little bit of time to develop, but I'm excited for it. It'd be nice to have that skill under my belt and, test it out on some actual people for a change. So those poor souls. But nonetheless, Nick,
I will not volunteer as tribute.
I was gonna say, if you got your GI scheduled for Tuesday in the Medical Arts Building, you might want to reschedule. Nonetheless, so yeah, I mean, it's kind of exciting. I mean, we're starting basically our clinicals, so I'm on IV rotation, and then the next couple of weeks I'm going to just be on the floor, on the 4th floor, and then we're going to do an OR rotation in the operating room as well too. So a bunch of different various things that we're going to have going on as well, and I'm really excited to get in the nitty gritty of it. Speaking of nitty gritty, we did have a trivia question here this last week, Mr. Maxon. It was about our Minnesota Wild. And of course, we're going to talk about this in just a second, but they did unveil their Winter Classic jerseys. So in Minnesota Wild history, how many seasons have they not had an alternate jersey, outdoor jersey, or retro jersey during a season? So like jerseys must be worn consistently to be considered an alternate jersey. So like, wearing them for a special event or once or twice a year doesn't count, minus like the stadium series, because like the reverse retros, we wore them for, quite a few games. So
yeah. Ooh, quite a few. I want to say half. I'm just going to go 10.
You're actually not far off. Our winner was Tanner Heath. The Minnesota Wild have had 8 seasons without a third jersey, 2000 through 2003. So 3 seasons
that makes
there.
Sense, yeah. Then the red jersey came out.
Yep. And then 2007 through 2009, they didn't have an alternate. And then,
Correct.
of course, they came out with the cream colored, one with the cursive crest. And then 2017 through 2020, before the reverse retro, they dropped that third jersey. So it's been 8 seasons.
Yeah, they got rid of the Reds, thank God. But I was never a fan of the Reds. I don't know. To me, I know the color scheme gets a lot of criticism for the Christmas colors. And I definitely think in jerseys past, there was way too much, but the double color, I think it should only be more of an accent color. But we'll get into jersey talk here in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, I actually always really liked the original jerseys and socks that we had when the team came out. I liked the sock style. I thought the original jerseys were all right. I guess I don't really understand why they really moved away from it so much. The jerseys now are okay. They're not anything to shout about, but I mean, they're nice, they're clean, they're simple. I always liked the original jerseys, in my honest opinion. I know some people that didn't like them at all. I don't know how to feel about I don't know what you would call it, the wild cursive numbering on the original jerseys with kind of the jagged edges, if you will. Were you a fan of the jerseys growing up? When they first came out?
When I first saw it, I think I was a fan, and then I kind of got old of them just because the one thing again too that really drove me nuts was that piping that was all the way down on the arm. I was like, who the hell designed that? But at the end of it, when they changed the road jersey first, the whites, I really liked the new whites. I still do with the red lettering. I think that's a really good accent to it. I don't mind the new homes, but like I said, it kind of seems cookie cutter to a degree. But again, I do like the way that, they're using more just the green and the cream as sort of like your main colors, and really trying to take those accent colors and really just subtly put them in the jersey so it's not too overwhelming. So I do like the current jerseys. The reverse retros, again, as a North Star fans, I also bought a shirt at the state. So I was at the state fair yesterday, and I bought a shirt that says Norton Green still sucks, because he does. And for those Minnesota State Fair companions, yes, you did have to get a bucket of the Sweet Martha's cookie jar. Yes. So 4 dozen cookies. I think we stood in line for about 10, 15 minutes towards pretty close to about 10, 15 a night just to get them. But dang, they're good. And when you put them in the microwave for about 10, 15 seconds, they're like fresh out of the oven. They're fantastic. So 2 more days left at the fair. It's kind of a bittersweet day. I know we're kind of going off on a wrong tangent here, Noah, but the state fair is kind of one of those very bittersweet times, because there's the food there. Again, I go for the food and for the beverages that you just can't get anywhere else. Again, there's breweries that actually will only make specific beer for the fair that you actually cannot buy outside of the fairgrounds. So you almost have to go there, get them. One, I'm just going to stick with the tangent. I don't care. So there's a brewery called Lithbridge. It is it's based in Stillwater, Minnesota, so on the east side of it, close to Wisconsin, for those who don't know. And they have what's called mini donut ale. And so what they do is actually line the glass with donut sugar. So it's got that like sugared rim, and then the ale is in there. And it's funny. You taste it without the sugar, and you still can kind of get hints of the cinnamon and some other hints, but you actually put the sugar in, you take a sip. I mean, you would not have a clue. It tastes very, very close to a mini donut. So for those who, it's fun. I
was just going back to, when you have the cookies in front of you, you warm them up for 10 to 15 seconds in the microwave to make sure they're fresh. For those who don't know, that's actually how Nick gets ready for the Huskies Warming House podcast in the morning. He just pops in the microwave for a couple seconds and boom, he marinates, and then he's ready to go. You
can't overcook it though, because this just goes to liquid. So no. And for those on the audio class, I'm talking about my brain that I still think I have somewhere. I have no idea. Never been proven I had one in the first place.
It's in there. Otherwise, look in the little cookie tub. It might be in there. You might have left it there. Yeah, open up the back plate.
Open up the back plate, yeah.
Well, speaking of back plates and shoulder plates, like you mentioned, the Minnesota Wild color palette in general. First of all, I like your note about the road uniforms. I don't think they get enough love, to be honest with you. I like the current road uniforms, but the Minnesota Wild did unveil their Winter Classic jerseys, and the Christmas color palette with the cream and kind of wheat colors is a challenging palette to work with. I think that's the first thing that we have to start out with. So Minnesota Wild designers have a tough task ahead of them, and I think that some people like the reds here and there, some people don't like them. So you already have a very divisive fan base. So I kind of was curious as to see what our fans thought. The other interesting thing too, I was going through some of essentially posts and social media posts and message boards from some of the bigger hockey media organizations that had revealed the jersey as well, and kind of wanted to see what other people that were non-Minnesota fans, had kind of thought. So I was sifting through the comments as well. And it's very intriguing to see where kind of the Minnesota camp is and where the rest of the NHL fan base is on these uniforms. But let's kind of start with the uniforms themselves. First of all, of course, the main color of the uniform is that dark green. You've got two stripes along the arms that are red with cream colored double striping around them, and then the similar stripe down on the bottom, and then kind of a floating stripe in the middle of the chest, if you will, and then red shoulders as well. Of course, the captaincy and the assistant captains have that little C and A up above that floating shoulder, which is kind of an interesting look. The numbers are just plain cream colored with no outline, and then a Minneapolis St. Paul, the little logo on the crest, which I really like. I think that's a cool little crest on the logo, and then the collar, of course, is cream colored as well. The shells essentially are this off color, essentially an off color of brown, but it's the same brown that is actually part of the Minnesota Wild color palette and was actually part of the striping in the original uniform as well. And then the socks, same striping as the arms on the uniform. Very, very divisive here, Mr. Maxson. So first, let's get to what our viewers and social media friends thought here. And then I want to get your take on these uniforms for sure. We had 113 people vote in our poll. So thank you so much for doing that. If you did that, 4 options were, do you love them? Do you hate them? They tried and it's okay, I guess, or change one thing and then they're good. So really, really close poll here. 32 people loved them. 31 people hated them. 30 people said, it's okay. And 20 people said, if you just change one thing, then they're going to be totally great. And some of the comments that I kind of come on here, we'll get to those in just a second. Nick, what is your impression here? If there's anything to be said for you not liking too much red in the uniforms, I got a feeling there's a couple things you want to change on this uniform.
So initial thoughts, I was like, what is this? I'm not going to lie. It's one of those where, you know how they say in art, sometimes to really appreciate, you just kind of have to stare at it for a little bit. Yeah, I did that. And I kind of started to go, okay. Now again, what made it more difficult, not just the color palette, Noel, but, this team hasn't been around that long. It's only been around for 20, 21 years. So you don't have an original 6 legacy where you can go back and pull old designs and, really sort of dip into the Wild history per se. Mind you, and the Wild, I think, did a really good job when they released it to try to, give the backstory of the design and, sort of a collaboration of I think St. Paul Saints, a couple of other different collabs. And, there was a couple of pictures that showed it. And after kind of reading the historical connection to the jerseys, I started to kind of appreciate it more. Now, I'm kind of in the camp that says change one thing, that floating stripe that's on the chest. You can probably do away with those for my personal take. But at the end of it, the more I looked at it, again, the more I was like, okay, these aren't bad. Again, this was a tough task. Again, there's not a ton of history to pull from. Again, you're working with a color palette. It's like, dude, it's October or it's September and Christmas is in 3 months. What the hell are you guys doing? So, so it wasn't an easy jersey design. But I think for, trying to really be true to the roots historically and trying to also, I suppose incorporate the Minnesota Wild, especially the team colors and maybe modernize a little bit. Not bad. But I think, again, it's for jersey designs, this was not an easy one. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think your point is very valid, and it speaks a lot to how you really have to put your frame of mind here. If you go back historically, right, to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and look at jersey designs, you talk about bridging that gap, that floating stripe. It would have been very easy to take that floating stripe and just put it in the shoulders, kind of to what we've seen in some other, like the New York Rangers, their Winter Classic jerseys, things like that, and just make the shoulders a little more modernized. But if you go back into that era, a lot of the shoulder patches and the shoulder striping or coloring, if you will, did look like that, where it was just one color that kind of came down the arm like that, and the striping was done, in the middle of the uniform. It's a different take. And I think that's where a lot of people are, where they're kind of letting it marinate a little bit and seeing. And obviously, this is just a picture of Jared Spurgeon. They might look totally different on TV. They might look totally different in person. And of course, I didn't really get a chance to see the back of the jersey too much too as well. I love the crest in the middle of the jersey. I think the one thing that might be a more of a detractor than people realize with this uniform is that the stripes on the arms and the floating stripes, how the red is encompassed with the two cream colored stripes, you might get a little bit more of a clash with that when you're looking at it from far away on the ice. If you're in the broadcast booth. And I say that because when putting a lighter color next to that deep red color, it has a tendency to make it look a little bit lighter or brighter or more pinker, if you will, than it would if you were up close to it as well. So that's the only thing too that I think I would kind of posit there too, is the challenge of you're trying to create that contrast, but at the same time, you might have a little bit of issue with that red looking a little more pink if you're looking at it from far away on like a TV screen or something like that as well too. But nonetheless, yeah, I mean, if I had to give it a grade, I mean, purely I 4.5, 5 out of 10. One of those things that I think for its purpose, for knowing that it is a one-off event, it's not a new third jersey. It's something that's meant to represent the history of the city and the region. I think it's okay. It's not, oh my God, amazing. But I know a lot of people that ripped on the 2016 Stadium Series jerseys, and those were, I don't know, those were 5.5s or 6s. I mean, they weren't anything, oh my God, crazy, but I mean, they did okay. But I think it just kind of speaks to the color palette. I don't know that unless we revert back to the Minnesota North Star colors, or if we do kind of a St. Paul Saints, like blue and gold and white kind of mashup type thing, I don't know that you're going to really make this fan base happy with a jersey that's going to appease everyone. I think it's just going to be way, way too challenging. So I kind of asked that question, almost 20% of our social media participants, I wanted to know, if you're going to change what would you change about the jersey? And even this was a little bit all over the board here. A lot of people hated that chest stripe, like you said. The gloves and pants were not a big sell for a lot of people, thought that the coloring was kind of odd. No need for the Minnesota in the state outline.
I like that.
I like that too. I mean, I could have gone either way. I mean, not like it was a necessity, but I thought they did okay with that. The stripe under the collar can go, again, another one of those. But otherwise they're not bad at all. A lot of people wanted that M logo that used to kind of be on the shoulders. I think it's still on the shoulders of the current home jerseys. Yeah, they wanted that as the crest on the middle. A lot of people, polarizing. A couple people, I want to know, what did they think, if they liked it? A lot of people thought the Stadium Series jersey was a flop, and this one was much better than the Stadium Series. A lot of people wanted, again, getting rid of that stripes to the top of the chest was kind of the most constant theme. And kind of to cap it off, people said, I wouldn't like them as an all-season sweater, but for a special event, they're nice and they're okay. When you go to other fan bases and look at them, there's a little bit more appreciation for it. A lot more people have liked it than the Minnesota fan base has. Obviously it's still been pretty polarizing, but a lot of the comments that I have read, a lot of other fan bases like them a little bit more than I think Minnesota Wild fans do. So that's kind of an interesting little bit to kind of take a look at as well. But yeah, Nick, if you had to give the jerseys a grade, what would you throw out there?
Are we going this on out of 10?
Yeah, out of 10.
I'd probably give it a 7, actually.
Okay.
Only because, again, the one thing about the state of hockey is there's so much heritage to this game, right? So, you're trying to really dig back. And again, there's not a whole lot of history with the NHL squad itself. So you don't have sort of that old time hockey sort of jersey that they had 80 years ago. They just don't have that. So they were trying to find something that was, and they found it with, the old St. Paul Saints and sort of, those Minneapolis teams. I'm taking a look at the website actually right now. No, on the back. It's just the nameplate in white and then large numbers. Now, I will mention that, the glove and the breezers, they're trying to mimic the leather look that they had back in the day. I get that the color scheme isn't there, but I think a couple of other Winter Classic jerseys have gone that way too. Yeah. They also have that elbow patch too, that circular elbow patch that's in that sort of faux leather, sort of thing there too. So, it's not bad, honestly, for what you're trying to accomplish. Like, it really give, I suppose, true appreciation of the heritage of the state, and really trying to show that, with the Minneapolis and St. Paul and Minnesota going against the Twin Cities, the Twins on, their center field have got Minnie and Paul, shaking hands across the Mississippi River. And I think they were trying to accomplish that same thing, which is where, hey, this is, we're trying to be the united, state of hockey. And this is our, kind of throwback to the heritage and the history of the game in the state. And this is what we came up with. So I think if you look at it from that frame of mind, I think it's all right. And again, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, not too bad. So I gave it a 7.
I think that it honestly comes down to the color palette. I think if we're looking at this in North Star colors, or if we're looking at this, like I said, in St. Paul Saints colors, I think people look at it maybe a little bit differently and start to appreciate a little bit more, where they're willing to overlook some of the unique striping because the colors are maybe more affectionate to their taste, if you will. But I think a lot of people just have that adverse reaction to the reds, and they kind of can't get over that. So when you throw it into the rest of a jersey, I think it's just difficult for people to kind of get beyond that as well too. But yeah, I mean, I thought they were middle of the pack. I mean, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I love them, but I was like, I don't hate them, and I'm curious. I really want to give them a look in the actual event before I, truly comment on them, and what they might look like in their full aura and effect, if you will. We're just approaching 40 minutes here on the show. Actually, we're just hitting 40 minutes as we speak right now. We're just past it. Before we move to our extra ice session, Nick, I want to spend about 2 or 3 minutes here. We did get some news about Kirill Kaprizov potentially saying that he might be closer to a deal. Potentially the deal is already, the amount has already been decided, but now it's about contract structure. What rumblings have you heard, and how much credence should we take into this? And how right was I about the bridge term year contract?
Well, you're not right just yet, Noah. Yeah. So it sounds like we're hearing $9 to $9.5 million per season. And that's, I think Bruce has mentioned that a couple of times. And I think it seems to be the leak, right, is that both sides have sort of come to that 4 to 5 year contract length. Which would mean if that ends up being true, then yes, you would be right. I almost threw from my mouth there, but but again, you kind of wondered. We talked about this, I think, a little off air and a little bit last week too, is how much does CSKA Moscow coming out and saying he's not signing here contribute to maybe some of these talks moving forward, right? Because again, the whole premise of this was Paul Theophanis, the agent for Kirill Kaprizov, saying, hey, if you don't sign here by September 1, he is going there. And was it the 28th or 29th, somewhere in there, a few days before the first, the team itself came out and says, hey, he's not signing here. So you kind of have to wonder, what, and that was the question I asked, that kind of takes away a little bit of sort of that leverage away from Theophanis at that point. So how do the negotiations go from there? You kind of hope that was maybe a tipping point. And for Guerin, as Stacey mentioned even this week, that he's still trying to be very, very careful. And again, I think it is more dire and a little bit more tricky the closer you get, because you come to agreements and you're hoping that as you inch closer to finally putting pen to paper, right? Like you don't overstep one thing, or you don't say something that all of a sudden it's like a deck of cards and the whole thing collapses again, right? So I think, I think it is close. I think both sides know that, hey, we're at September 5th now. So we're actually coming up to where, once he signs, there's going to be time for him to take to get a work visa, for him to travel back to the United States and get into training camp. I know both sides want that. So, we've said this before, and, I'll say it again. This week, especially now, is a tale of two cycles, right? And that is one, we're still okay. He's still not signed. So we figured this would continue. But as we said last week, is that this week is kind of now important to getting him signed, because now it's about timing and getting him over here and getting him back in with the club. Preseason starts in 2-3 weeks coming up. It's not
28th, yeah.
28th. So it's less than 3 weeks away. Just about, actually, no, check that. It's about a little over 3.5 weeks away. But, for the fans, for the organization, and for the player Kaprizov, it's time to finally get this thing done, wrap it up and get him over here so we can just put this behind us for 3, 4, 5 more years. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. At maximum, you got 10 days. I think by the 15th, it's got to be done. It's got to be set in stone. I would say even by next Sunday is a great goal to shoot for, but by next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think is your last window before it's like, okay, we got a problem here. So they're going to have a week and a half, basically, or a little less than a week and a half to get it done. And it's got to get done if you're Minnesota, because you got to get training camp, get the guys on the ice, get them rolling. And I'm excited to see how Marco Rossi, Matt Boldy make the adjustment as well too. But they got to be playing with a world-class player like Kaprizov on the ice, to kind of see that as well. I mean, he's got to be there. There's just
100%.
There's no other way to put it. But yeah, like you mentioned, let's all take a deep breath. A week is a long time when it comes to contract negotiations and business things. And if you're general manager Bill Guerin, a week to hammer down a contract for one player, again, that's a lot of time that you potentially can spend focusing on that and getting that deal done. Not that you want to, but a week is, it's an amount of time that makes this very feasible. Nick,
I think it's more about the finish line here, Noah. You talk about a week being long, for this negotiation, it's a drop in the bucket, but I think for where they're at now, from what we're hearing the negotiations are at, this is, you're trying to, the present's wrapped, you're trying to put the bow on now. And, again, you're really trying to be very delicate. You want it to look good. You're trying to finish it off, but you're trying not to rush it. You're trying to, make sure to take it at the appropriate timing. And as you mentioned too, you got 7 to 10 days where, for at least not to interfere with any scheduling, you'll be fine. Once you get past day 10 into day 11, now we're talking about, okay, at some point, do things have to change to get pen to paper so that we can get over here and not interfere with any of the preseason as well as the regular season too, coming up for the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah. So obviously pay attention, the next, not this upcoming, Wednesday, but next Wednesday, that's kind of where we start to go, oh boy, all right, we got to get something. This is not looking good, but again, be patient. Hopefully by the time we have the show next week, we'll have a confirmed answer. That would be amazing. That would be awesome for this Minnesota Wild club. Mr. Maxson, do we have anything else to add in the main portion of the show?
No, I don't think so.
You look so terrified there.
For this guy to see the money in his eyes, because he already has been already, can we just get this done, please? Because what I want to see in my eyes is 50 or more goals going in the net from this guy's stick, because I do believe he's a 50 goal scorer in the NHL. And that doesn't happen unless he sees dollar signs. So Della, Bill, Kirill, let's get him in. Let's get him signed. Let's get this thing done.
I got really terrified you're going to take off your shirt on the show. We don't need to terrorize our listeners. And
I don't need to break my camera either. So
the Huskies Warming House podcast goes rogue. Anyway, that will do it for the main portion of our show. Stick around for our extra ice session. We're going to talk about a little bit of Arizona Coyotes, Montreal Canadiens, and Carolina Hurricanes, everyone's favorite teams, right, around the National Hockey League, and the interesting developments that we've had with some offer sheets here in the past week. And welcome in to the extra ice session. Noah Grant joined alongside my co-host and Nick Maxson. Nick, we had an offer sheet a week ago, and now we are a week later, Sunday, September 5th, and that offer sheet hasn't been matched, and those draft picks have been used within good reason. Fill the listeners in on what the heck has happened in the past week and a half or so.
So last Saturday, the Carolina Hurricanes pulled the ultimate troll job, and it was absolutely beautiful, right? So Carolina definitely a swing back at the Canadiens' offer sheet to Sebastian Aho, which in theory, if you're going to go to an offer sheet, go big or go home. And Montreal, well, in true semblance of Marc Bergevin, it came up way short. Sebastian Aho matched that deal, and it actually saved the Carolina Hurricanes money. From what the negotiations revealed after that was that they saved probably about $1 million to $1.5 million per season on that offer sheet. Carolina, and as you know, Noah, it's sometimes, whether it's sports, whether it's, at home, especially in hockey, sometimes you get hit and the instinct is, all right, I want to get you back, but I'm going to wait for the perfect time to do it. And Carolina did exactly that. They threw an offer sheet to their young former 3 overall pick center, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. He immediately signed a 1-year, $6.1 million offer sheet. And after that, for NHL rules, it's a 7 days period for where Montreal can either match that offer sheet, so they would retain the player, or they would not match it and there would be draft pick compensation. That week passed yesterday, as you mentioned, Noah, and Montreal got a first and a third round pick from the Carolina Hurricanes. The Hurricanes now have full property rights to Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And for Montreal, they know that they needed help down the middle. So they went calling to everybody's favorite Dungeons and Dragons folks. It is the Arizona Coyotes, and they able to get Christian Dvorak. Actually, it was a center that was on the Minnesota Wild's radar too for a while. A good young center, 25 years old. He's signed for 4 more years, including this year, at a very good cap hit. Cap hit, I believe, is a 4.4.
Yeah.
$5 million for, until 2025. Good center. I think the big knock on him is maybe him in the faceoffs, but on the offensive zone, he's a big body. He's got a good shot, and I think a lot of folks thought, as many other players maybe have been there before, with Arizona. Sometimes, the numbers are maybe limited because of maybe some of the just where the team is at. Again, it is what it is down in Arizona. But so that's kind of what happened, and here we are. Montreal taking some draft picks, going out and getting their a different center, a proven NHL center for those naysayers. And for a guy that I think will bring a little bit more size and probably a little bit more grit to his game. And I don't know, we'll see. I think at the end of the day, both teams win in this arch. Carolina becomes, I think, in a very, very stacked, Atlantic division. They get a little bit more offense to them, which they lacked, especially in the deep rounds of the playoffs. And for Montreal, they replaced a center that they thought maybe was going to be part of the future, maybe not. And for Arizona, they get draft capital continually because, who knows it's going to be Arizona, Houston, or whatnot. Who knows what's going on down there. But they are definitely, speaking of Arizona, actually, when I talk about this real quick, because the draft, you talk about draft capital, right? You can talk about teams that are rebuilding. Listen to this, folks. In next year's draft, Arizona has not 1, not 2, 3 first-round picks, and not 1, not 2, but 5 second-round picks in next year's draft. Just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
No? So you talk about a team that's rebuilding, and I think obviously when they made some trades too, but when you give up one of your best young forwards over to Vancouver, Connor Garland, again, trading Christian Dvorak. Again, they also traded Darcy Kemper. The writing was on the wall, and holy cow, this team is going full rebuild mode here this year, and the draft picks would certainly tell you exactly why.
Yeah, I like how this team's going full rebuild mode after they were in half rebuild mode for like the past
20 years.
Yeah, exactly. I look at this deal. A lot of people, like you mentioned, the knock on Christian Dvorak. A lot of Montreal Canadiens fans were not happy with this, and I know Minnesota Wild fans were always saying, why do we want a guy like Christian Dvorak? I got to be honest, and I have his stats pulled up here. He is honestly, I think, a little bit a good comparison is like a more offensive Joel Eriksson Ek without the I think the X factor defensively that Eriksson Ek has, but a little bit more offensive upside. Okay. He's been in the league for 5 years now, right? Okay. 33 points in 78 games his first season, 37 and 78 the next year. Year after that, I believe he was hurt, if I'm not mistaken. So he had 20 games there, 7 points. Last year, 38 points in 70 games played. This year, in only 56 games, he was at 31 points. So on pace for at least probably 40 points, probably a career best for him, potentially, if the season had continued onward. Who knows what his production would have been through the end. 146 points in 302 career NHL games, consistently had, besides the season he was hurt, 15 or more goals. Hasn't been a 20 goal scorer, but he's been in between that 15 to 20 goal threshold every season. Very consistent with his point production, a good 200-foot player. And at $4.4 million a year through 2025, I'm kind of looking at this thinking, geez, the Minnesota Wild really could have used a guy like him, a guy that, really is the the more offensive upside in Nick Bonino, if you will. Good consistency, on both ends of the rink. What a great pickup, I think, for Montreal. They had a guy in Kotkaniemi, and Carolina's getting him where I think Kotkaniemi potentially has a little bit more offensive upside, and I think that's where Canadiens fans were going to. But you're getting, I would say, a proven NHL center right now that's going to really solidify, your middle six on that Montreal Canadiens group and really give him a lot of stability. Good offense. I believe he's a good penalty killer too, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
You're getting a guy who has a lot of tools in his toolbox and can do everything. And you're getting a player that's going to help you be successful right now and help you transition as an organization. Kotkaniemi might end up being the better center. We don't know. But I think Dvorak right now, what is he? He's only 25. That's the other thing. And at 6 foot 195, those are some pretty good numbers that he's put up so far on a really, really shitty Arizona team to boot. So I got to be honest. I think this is a move well done by Montreal using the trolling to their advantage. What do you think?
It's interesting how both teams ended up being, I suppose getting better from this.
Yeah.
Again, Carolina gets a little more skilled on the middle, which, they definitely showed they needed last year in terms of their depth, especially in the later playoff rounds when they ran into a Tampa Bay Lightning team that was out for blood the second time. Yeah. For Montreal, it's interesting when you actually talk about the last kind of few games for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. He was a healthy scratch for the last Stanley Cup final game. He felt like he had played his last game in a Montreal Canadiens uniform. So there was already maybe some tension with the player and potentially with the general manager in terms of where they saw, each other in terms of, their value on the team. But Montreal for losing a player that, again, as you mentioned, probably has some more upside and, on a more offensively, I suppose charged team like Carolina maybe will have the ability to really exercise that skill. Whereas Montreal, as we saw, was more of the defensive, just anaconda, for most of the playoffs last season. And Christian Dvorak, as you mentioned, not quite as the offensive upside, but does have it there. But you compared him with Joel Eriksson, again, sort of that just pain in the rear end to play against, which he can be again with that size. Again, he's young. He can skate pretty decently. He's not the best skater in the world, but, he can pot a few here and there. But again, down the middle, we all know that when you get the playoffs, it's all about your depth down the middle. It's for losing Jesperi, I did it again. Kotkaniemi. This is not a bad replacement. Again, as you mentioned, I wish the Wild would have got a pickup on him too, as far as a center. But again, we can have a separate debate about the Wild, but for both teams, this may end up working out great for both, and and even for the third for Arizona, because now there's stockpile, as I mentioned, with 8 picks in the first 2 rounds of this upcoming draft, and who knows that they get more. And speaking of the Coyotes, a quick note. I want to actually throw a quick trivia question out to you, Noah Grant, and that is, for next season, how many forwards does Arizona have signed through next year?
I'm assuming you're not going to allow me 10 seconds to look it up, clearly.
No. It's a trivia question, not a lookup session.
on their NHL roster, I'm assuming is what you mean. How many forwards for this upcoming season or after?
For 22-23, how many do they have signed? So beyond this year.
I'm going to go with 7.
3.
What?
They have Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, and Andrew Ladd. And I don't even think Andrew Ladd's played the last couple of years because I think he's been injured. So,
yeah.
But in theory, contractual wise, they have 3. Everybody else is either a UFA, and they have 2 RFAs in Lawson Krause and Christian Fisher. That is it. And then they have 3 defensemen signed. That's Jacob Chikrin, Shane Gostisbehere, and Connor Timmins, who, mind you, 2 of them were acquired via trade.
So what you're telling me is that when Arizona moves to Tempe, they just got to take a van, not a bus.
Yeah, at this point. Or if you want to take a 5-person propeller plane, that could work too.
Yeah. Although I got to be honest with you, Nick, when you're on the border, when it comes to propeller planes, be careful about where you're flying that plane. You never know.
That's so true.
But I mean, I like you mentioned previously, both teams had an opportunity to benefit from this. And when you lose a 3rd overall pick and you pick up a 2014 second rounder who's been more productive at this particular, point and juncture in his career, in Christian Dvorak, it's not often you lose a player of that caliber and end up replacing him with a player, of that caliber too, in that sense. And obviously they could have kept Jesperi as well too. But I mean, yeah, it's one of those rare moments in the NHL where we might see both teams be successful in the end of this. So yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to give a grade, if you will, I think the Canes, I think this is a B+ for them, simply because I think the price tag, I should say, for Jesperi leaves a little bit to be desired. I think if you're the Montreal Canadiens, I give this an A-. I think this is a nice, savvy move in a situation that could have been, not the greatest for Montreal. And now we have our answer to the trivia question. When is the last time we've had a successful offer sheet in the National Hockey League? It's not 2007. It's not Dustin Penner anymore. So
I flip it. I give Carolina an A+ just because, again, for an offer sheet to entice the player, right? You do overpay in offer sheets. That's just kind of the way these things go.
Unless you're Sebastian Aho.
Yeah. Well, again, that's when, the team doesn't know what the heck they're doing. Sorry, Mark Bergevin, but that was just not really well. But again, if you talked last week too, it's the 1 year hit, because you're going to be able to renegotiate with him in different ways on an extension. Mind you, he could sign a different contract for less money for a longer term some point throughout the season. Mind you, if he gets to his RFA status, and then the qualifying offer becomes 6.1 at the minimum. Yeah. So if for Carolina, maybe you're trying to avoid that, or even more so, again, if he does play well, and let's just say maybe Carolina, just the team isn't well, now you have value for him as a trade option too. So either way, Carolina wins. And plus, the troll job was so good. Oh my gosh. The drama between Carolina and Montreal, the way that they, from the announcement to pretty much quoting Marc Bergevin, to the way that Carolina on their Twitter page did it in French. I mean, it was just all of its glory. That drama, we need more of that, just petty drama in the NHL. That to me was fantastic. For Montreal, B+ again. And I think we haven't talked about this enough yet too, Noah, is that I think even stylistically, I think even Christian Dvorak could fit in better with the way that Montreal displays the game. They're more of that defensive trap style team. They're not a run and gun style. And you kind of saw with Kakaniemi, he definitely is more on that offensive first mindset, whereas Dvorak, again, being with Arizona, I'm going to continually pound the hammer and poke the dead bear, but just, not the most talented team. So you kind of have to work with what you get, not really able to go full steam up the ice, even though last couple of years, with some of those pieces that they, again, had to give away. I think Connor Garland, was really going to push the pace up the ice, and now he's a Vancouver Canuck. Thank you, Jim Benning, for that trade. And then also thank you, Jim Benning, for taking it over Ekman Larson deal, because why? But anyways.
You were talking about, and this maybe is our closing thought here as we move forward. Obviously, we're talking about, how did Montreal do? How did Carolina do? My question is this: if you only have 3 players locked up in Arizona, where does Phil the Thrill end up? Where does Phil Kessel end up?
Well, he's going to be 34 years of age. He's 33 this year. This is interesting because Phil, first of all, he was a Leaf for a while. Before they, drafted by Boston, became a Leaf, and we don't have to go to that, right? So first, he's got a no move clause, a modified no trade clause. So he's got that
from his days in
Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, but this is interesting. I don't think Arizona is done moving players. There's no question that they aren't. Now the question is going to be, because again, with Arizona and the sort of money issues, is this sort of the throwaway year per se, where do they look at a guy like Phil Kessel? And I think you would. We're a guy that has proven that he can be a playoff performer. He's definitely going to be a absolute, probably your top 10 players to be on the trade board coming up this trade season here for the NHL. You have some other pieces in here that probably could be to be dumped out. I think maybe the only couple of untouchables we have is Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, just because of his term, probably. He's got 5 years left in his deal, and maybe Jacob Chickard are the only 3 people that aren't moving. But I think everybody else has the option of getting out of here. And I think for Phil Kessel, again, for a playoff performer, for a guy that still can skate, even though with his diet consists of cheeseburgers and hot dogs, he can still skate better than, 95% of the players that are out there, even though he's at 33 years of age, still got a great shot. So I think he could be a nice trade acquisition. The problem with that is that Arizona would have to retain salary. His cap hit is $6.8 million. And again, a lot of teams that are towards the top of the, as you could say, the proverbial leaderboard are cap strapped. They would have to be a retained salary. But for 1 year, I don't think Arizona would mind. And if they're going to retain that salary, again, maybe they get another first round pick back to them. Yeah. And I think Arizona, again, is going to be trying to save some money here, as well as really doing a full on rebuild here as they look towards what could be their new home and maybe a new beginning in Tempe, which I think would be the best for the squad, best for the NHL, and best for the game of hockey being right next to Arizona State. We talked about this before last week. Just a quick thought here, Noah, that is there was a time for maybe 5 years ago, there was a joint proposal to build a joint facilities between Arizona State and the Arizona Coyotes, and that fell through. Arizona State finally got themselves their own new stuff, and maybe Arizona will join them, maybe less than 5 minutes away from campus. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited, hopefully, for Arizona to hopefully stick around, find a new home, kind of get their legs under them. It's been not only with the arena stuff and the status of the team, with the whole management stuff, with the
City of Glendale.
Yeah, Mitchell Miller stuff, with the draft combine stuff. Arizona's had a really, really tough go of it. Katie Strang hasn't made their life any easier, nor should she, but she's really opened up that door as well too. It's been a tough time in the desert. And honestly, I just want to see them hopefully get back to some sort of form and keep wearing those Kachina jerseys. And they have the Center Ice logo now. And those are pretty jerseys.
And, a lot of this is going to hinge, though, as we look forward to a big part of the future, whether it is in Arizona or where else, is going to be, what does Tempe do now? I mean, a lot of the future is at the hands of the Tempe City Council, and whether, and we don't know how many other bids there are. We don't know what Arizona's bid is. And you got to know that the city of Tempe is looking at the history and the relationship with the city of Glendale. What kind of debts do they have? Also, what kind of capital they can come up with, because for Arizona, the city of Glendale, that's got to be a clean sheet before they move out of there, if indeed they do, which kind of sounds like that is a dead horse at this point, that there hasn't really been any sort of attempt, at least from what we've heard, of any sort of renegotiating. And again, they're still left, even if Tempe does approve it, they have potentially a 3-year gap that they got to fill before that construction is completed. But even before we get to that point, Noel, there's going to be a lot of eyes on the city of Tempe and what they do. I don't remember reading, I'm not sure if you did read a timeline of when they're going to review the bids and when they would announce the winning bid. I didn't see anything like that. But, this will definitely be the next biggest step for this organization, is what does Tempe do? And if, we're all hoping they say yes to the Coyotes, but let's say they don't, that's huge. So that does definitely put more of that nasty relocation work back up probably to the top of most of the list. And, does that mean at that point, if it happens, does Gary Bettman step in? Does, do the other NHL owners step in and just try to make good with the city of Glendale? To me, I don't think I would even entice the city of Glendale at this point. They've made it very clear they want a different direction. So I think your options become very, very limited if the city of Tempe goes another direction. So we'll see. But, like I said, Arizona's been kind of a cursed franchise for a while. And with where they're at, you kind of hope that they can stay in Arizona. I think, again, that it's just haven't had a good go, for quite a while, and they need a good break. And so if Tempe can provide that for them, great. If not, this could look very, very different very, very soon.
Yeah, 2012 really the last year that the then Phoenix Coyotes really kind of had a really good run, outs by none other than our Dustin Penner and the LA Kings that year as well in the Western Conference Final. But speaking of things ahead, I think that will do it for our show today. Looking ahead as well, we've got episode number 78, of course, on Sunday. Don't forget to check that one out. Still working, I think, on a guest this week. I know we've been kind of hit or miss with guests. I know in a couple weeks we're going to have Brett Larson. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really know how to explain it. I mean, it's kind of been a little bit of, I know people are getting back into school, getting back into the rhythm of things. It's been kind of hard to connect with people. And the other thing too, and I guess to be truthful and frank, is that I don't want to say we've enjoyed the time off, but it's kind of been nice for us to kind of, put things into focus as we get ready for things in the upcoming season as well too. So we're not we're actively looking for guests. We're not trying to not have guests, just to not have guests. But that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think we're doing all right. We've appreciated the listenership. We've appreciated those who have really continued to stick with the main portion of the show, which seems to have gotten more and more successful as we've gone through the summer. So it's been really exciting to see where we're transitioning less than a month away from some Huskies hockey, Nick. So it's going to be a good time. Anything else you want to add here, Mr. Maxson?
It's Sunday for everybody that's out there in the state of hockey. And do I dare say even in North Dakota? Do I even want to wish people out there good? I suppose I could. No, have a safe and happy Labor Day weekend for everybody. I know for a lot of the parents that are out there, especially in Minnesota, the kids, this is their last big weekend, last hurrah. So enjoy it, be safe, because school starts on Tuesday. Oh my gosh. Well, we're already 2 weeks in now, so why do we care, right? Yeah. So, but be safe, have fun, and we'll see you next week here in the Den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Permix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.